Record. Hello, everybody. Just while we're waiting for a few more folks to come on in, if you'd like to just feel into what trees you've got growing around you, who are beloved green ones near you, and pop up the names of them in the chat room. And it might be ash or elderberry or gum, but it might be another name that you have for them as well. I know a couple of queens of the forests and jeweled dew catchers. So redwoods, yeah, red oaks. Oh, I don't think I know red oaks. I'm sure I'd like to. So yeah, just let's have a stream of what trees there are so we can start to build up a bit of a forest of who's gathering in the room with us today, in the human and the other than human realm. Maple, walnut, apple, and oak. Oh, love to visit your land. I've got mulga here, out here in the desert. Mulga and river red gums, and things with lots of prickles. So, oh, this is wonderful. Just seeing this whole list of trees, whole lists of relationships coming up on the chat of these beings that you know and love and relate to. Let's begin. This is the Journey into a Dark Wood Masterclass with me, Jacqui Bushell. And today we're going to be taking a dive into the forests of enchantment, the forests of fairy tales. And we'll also be exploring a little bit about the legacy of the witch, who is usually the threshold guardian, shall we say, and has a variety of roles. So we'll be exploring her role within the forest. And I'm going to be leading you through some of the place of the forest in our psyche and in our culture, but also for us personally. And I'd like to lead you into a deeper meditation space, because I always like for people to have your own experience. Hello, woofers who are coming along as well. Uh, so you can have your own experience and your own sense of how the forest and how the wise old one of the woods is relating with you today, and what messages that might have. And also the way, like for me so much, it's about listening, and how is it that we are listening in with ourselves and listening in with what it is that the forest of all wise knowing, the forest of mystery, the forest of challenges and grace can bring in for us today. And I think one of the key things that I believe that fairy tales do, and that the forest, particularly in fairy tales, is they bring us into a greater reciprocity with nature. I think fairy tales are utterly subversive because they act as bridges between the other world, between our personal psyche and soul, the underworld and this realm here. They're like portals that can take us into so many realms and bring it here into this moment. So they give us greater options and subversive options of how it is that we're relating with ourselves and the world. And they bring us into a deeper communion, a deeper way of listening in with the earth. Then for those of you who might be interested, stay on for a few minutes later at the end, and I'd like to mention Wolf Song, which is a program about taking a deeper dive into the forest, but I'll chat about that later. A little bit about me first, for those of you who haven't connected with me as yet. How did I start doing this work? I think I've always loved stories. Stories for me have been a refuge and a way of opening infinite possibilities in a world that I just thought was small. I just thought it was Port Arlington where I grew up, and that was all pretty much the world was when I was a kid. But books, but stories opened me up into other possibilities and magic beyond imagining. And then once I became a herbalist and an essence manufacturer, I thought that stories were a hobby. You know, one of those things that aren't part of your proper kind of work. And it was just something I was interested in. And as a herbalist, and mainly as an energetic type herbalist and working with people emotionally and spiritually, I learned to have a lot deeper conversations with the land, with plants and with rocks, and learning about other languages and languages of the senses and of the body and of the intuition. And one of my key learnings that started shape-shifting a lot of things for me was actually my first visit to the States. Long time ago, many years ago. And I spent 3 months in a forest in upper New York State. And I'd gone there after being a herbalist for a number of years, and I had this sort of set sense of my identity. I was a specialist in local medicinal plants, and I knew so much about the actions and the Latin and who they were and how. So I got to this forest and I realized that I knew nothing, that all of my familiar names for where I was in East Coast Australia, I, I just didn't know the names of your trees. I didn't recognize half of the plants. And it totally shook my sense of identity. And what I realized was that I was usually looking for familiar things. I wasn't actually seeing who was really there. I was looking to identify rather than simply to be with. So that time in the States in a forest of unfamiliarity taught me how to listen with things in an entirely different way and to see the wholeness of the herbs and the plants and the trees, and to see their relationships and their patterns and how they interacted with me, not just me going to them. And I came into this dance of listening and language that broadened me incredibly. And I left my Latin behind for 3 months. Actually, I don't think I ever really picked it up again. And I realized that all I was seeing were patterns and patterns of communication. And then it dawned on me, all these are stories. So when I came back and started landing even more in this way of relating and exploring shifting perceptions and playing with edges and boundaries between me and everything else, I realized that the stories and myths that I loved for so long gave a framework, a really strong, dynamic, catalyzing, rich framework for people doing deep transformational work and for people wanting to come into a greater relationship with the land, coming into a greater way of belonging. So I recreated my entire work and called it Sacred Presence, because I realized that we need to be able to find ways of anchoring deeply in ourselves to come into greater connection with spirit and with the bridge that we are as humans and our incredible potential that is ripening so much at the moment, at these times of incredible change and vibrational shifting. And that these stories are like, they're like living creatures that can support us and take us in really deep, but hold us as well, so that we can then come out the other side with a new sense of self and relationship, that they're guides holding many meanings and possibilities. So since then, I've used stories as guides of taking us into really rich questions or exploring what it is that our soul might be longing to express at this time. So for me, I work a lot with eco-mythology and energetic awareness and coming into relationship with spirit and spirit this way, and to come into relationship with which is why I'm also talking about forests today, with our instinctual wisdom, with our deep belly knowing, and to be able to connect with this in the roots of our being, within the earth, with our heart mind, our heart wisdom, and with our wise, bright intuition, and to be able to work with that in harmony, to be able to support us in what it is we're becoming and what it is we and the earth are dreaming ourselves into at this time. So I kind of run retreats and workshops and online things all around those themes, that to come into more of our wild, wise ways, to untame ourselves and stretch ourselves more. So I kind of conceive of stories like a river that just connects everything, connects land and nature and me, all of us individually and humanity in the cosmos, and that they can take us into all sorts of places that we might never have been before. So I think just before we dive into the forest, and we've got this long list of beloveds up there on the chat room, I just invite you to have a stretch and to stretch out your bowels, just to come in a little bit more into this space and out of that talking head space and into body land, into earth space, and just have a sense of the breeze through your leaves and that sense of movement that the wind gives you. And everyone's on mute, I think. So if you breathe into yourself and if you breathe out the sound of wind through leaves, whatever that sound might be. Do you know every tree has its own sound song signature when the breeze goes through it, depending on leaf size and boughs and flexibility. So when the wind goes through a tree that you love, you will always be able to recognize it. It's like its unique song. So if you feel into the breeze and your own unique sound song when the wind goes through you. So let's dive, no, Julian, you're okay. Let's dive into the forest, because the forest of enchantment, the forest it's common to so many fairy tales through Europe, through India, through Asia, through parts of Africa, through America. So many tales have evolved and come out of the forest. Because like I was saying before, I think the forest is a bridge, a sacred, holy, wild, chaotic, dangerous bridge between here or the village, the safe, the status quo, where the hearth is, where things are regular, and it brings us into a place where things are untamed, where they're unknown, where anything can happen. And then it takes us straight into the mythic realm where we can hear the words, the voice, the sound of soul coming through. The forest is part of our collective imagination. It's dark, it's shady, it's dangerous, it's enigmatic, it's perilous. It's frightening. Sometimes it's terrifying. It can kill you in there. And it's also a refuge. There's so many gorgeous fairy tales of women that have hidden in the forest, who have felt safe in there, who have been cared for by animals, by trees, by old women, by dwarves, by other creatures, by fairies, by the old woman who's the guardian of the well, where the women have found their hands again, they've regrown, where Prince Ivan was able to choose a way, where other princes got their eyesight back. It's a place that is a catalyst for incredibly deep learning. It's a metaphor for our psyche on different levels. It's a metaphor for the chaos, for example, over these last few years, and the massive changes that we're in the world, with how the earth is changing and what humanity is being asked to step up into. We are in the dark woods at the moment. And in the dark woods, what's that quote? I'm in a dark wood wandering blindly. But the woods also have a massive intelligence, because the forest is an incredible expression of community and of the intelligence of nature, which is about balance. It's not sentimental. It's not necessarily kind, but what it does is it reveals truth, not always in the way that we'd like, not always gently, but what it does is it can strip away, it can strip away that which is our baggage, that which is our habitual limitations, the ways that we make ourselves safe and small. Because there are so many eyes and listening in the forest, we become, even though it's hidden and there's less sunlight, we in a way become more visible in there and more true to ourselves. because we are being witnessed at every angle by the trees, by the breeze, by the mosses on the ground, by the rocks. Because of that level of wild aliveness that is there, you cannot not be seen in there. You know what it's like when you walk into the woods and there's that hush that descends, and you can feel the silence like a tangible entity. And then you start to drop in a little more, and the forest kind of shrugs around you, and then the birds go, oh yeah, okay, she's all right, he's okay, we know them. And then they start singing again. And then that whole embrace of you becoming part of the mandala of the forest. So there's an embracing and an accepting of you, but it's never entirely safe in there. It's alluring, it's intriguing, it's challenging, and it holds incredible mysteries. It holds animals that are disguised as humans, and humans that are disguised as animals, and shape-shifting beasts of all sorts. It's you might see a light in the forest, and who knows whether it's okay to go there or not. You might end up marrying fox woman, or taking bear as your husband, taking a tree as your lover. You don't know when you go into that feast whether there'll be a beast in there and who that beast really is. It takes us out of reason and logic and linear paths. It steeps us into the mythic imagination where everything is a spiral and a labyrinth. There's no one path in and one path out, but it just leads you and winds you, or the branches will come across. I'm sure every one of you, all of us have had those times in our life when it feels like we're in a dark wood wandering. Where the hell do I go? The branches are come across here. Do I try and just backtrack and walk out? Do I hold to my goal? Who the hell am I anyway? Those times when we're lost or we're stuck or the project isn't going, everything's going crazy, or you're in the absolute confusion, or you're in grief or loss, or the story of betrayal, or the story of how do I find which path to hold to at this time? What do I trust in myself is one of the lessons of the forest. What do I trust in here if I cannot trust anything out there? Even branches will close across a path and lead me in another way. Who knows if that's an okay way or not? What can I trust except my body wisdom? It roots us right back in here, and a different way of listening that is beyond the mind. There's so many stories about heroes and heroines who have to be able to access another part of themselves. Like the story of Prince Ivan, who goes cantering off on his fine horse into the forest on his brilliant quest. I know where I'm going, horns tooting, and here I go. And he reaches a crossroad in the forest, and the trees gather in darkly, and he hears a voice that says, if you take this path, you will die. If you take that path, your horse will die. You choose, no other option. So he chooses, my horse will die. When the horse dies, a wolf comes up and says, now you must ride me. In the forest, we cannot ride that which is tamed, that which is familiar, that which is, so familiar to us and works within our control. The wolf has no bridle and no reins. You have to discover a new relationship and find something in you that is able to ride the wolf's back. Something in you that is able to, like in East of the Sun and West of the Moon, that has to be able to cling to the bear's back and say, okay, I will hold on. I will hold on and see what my becoming is now. I'm happy, or maybe not happy to, I will surrender to this and see what it is that might actually arise. Because in the forest, there's all sorts of allies. And what I love about it is that the allies are unexpected. I love how shamanic fairy tales are, because nobody raises an eyebrow at a singing mouse or a singing bird, or the bear that comes along and says, I've got a thorn in my paw, can you do something about it? Or the crow that says, okay, I'll save your life as you've just saved mine, and then they do. So there's these incredible allies within the environment that then saves them. Then there's impossible tasks that you're given, tasks that take us to the bones of our being because they are so impossible and treacherous. I mean, how on earth do you sort out poppy seeds from dirt? You know how much like dirt poppy seeds look like. How can you do that before the morning? How can you climb the glass mountain or find the princess in the isolated tower somewhere in the middle of the forest? You can't do that without the grace of an ally. And that ally cannot operate by logic. That ally is something that arises from the earth and speaks in animal tongues, that speaks in senses, that speaks in sensuality, that speaks in dreams and rhythms and patterns and cycles. So that's what the forest calls us into. It calls us into our heart and our intuition and a wilder dreaming. This is the language of soul. This is the language of the other world. And I guess the other key thing that always comes up in these stories as well is the importance of being kind and courteous. It's always the nice sister who says, okay, little bear, I'll help you. Or when you don't kill someone and you could, or you be kind to the incredibly ugly old woman and you receive gifts beyond imagining. Or else it's, apart from being kind and courteous, it's where you set really good boundaries. I'm not taking that, and walk on. There's so many lessons within this and within these stories, and deception as well. You've got to have your heart, mind, body, heart listening honed to be able to know where's deception. Is this gorgeous looking house made of gingerbread actually something that I should be eating? Should I be terrified at Baba Yaga's house? He's leering over me and there's skulls with these gaping smiles everywhere. Is this a kind of okay place to be? And something in your bones go, hell yeah, this is exactly where I should be. How am I going to work with it? Or like the woman who became a fox, she took one look at that ogre and said, I'm out of here, baby. And just ran for the hills and escaped and found all sorts of wondrousness by her setting that boundary and going. So there's that level of listening that tests your mettle, that tests your true self. And there's also something in the forest. What's just come to my mind is, do you remember in The Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil in the forest? And he was the forest keeper. He was a bear shapeshifter. And the ring, the evil ring of Mordor couldn't bind him. For him, it was just a trinket. Oh yeah, ring, nothing. It was like the forest knows and it can see through anything. There is no power that can contain it. So when we step into the forest, we're stepping into that level of wisdom that can see through anything. That is, it's a cosmos in itself that cannot be bound. So I'm actually also just thinking of, there's a really great little short poem by Carol Ann Duffy, because I'm thinking of Red Riding Hood, which is one of the underlying tales that we work with in Wolfsong. And because it always baffled me why grandma, for instance, was taken in by the wolf at the door. I mean, really, for heaven's sake, what old woman who's lived in the forest her entire life is going to be taken in by a wolf knocking at the door and eating her? I mean, really, that's just garbage. That's just would not happen. Personally, I think they were old friends from way back. Or a little girl a maiden coming in and visiting Granny, not being able to distinguish between grandma and a wolf. I mean, really? I mean, that's sort of a fascinating concept in itself. And Carol Ann Duffy writes, she was saying, no, why on earth would you follow the wolf or the bear or risk being eaten alive by them? Why wouldn't you just run away? And she says, here's why. Poetry. The wolf I knew would lead me deep into the woods. It would lead me away from home, and it would lead me to a dark and tangled thorny place lit by the light of owls. It would lead me to a place of poetry and adventure. And it would lead me to a place where the hard and the perilous and the dangerous and the wondrous work of transformation begins. Would you say yes to the wolf? Would you say yes to the bear or the lion or to the oak tree or to that old woman who beckons and says, follow me, my dear? So when you come out again, because one of the curious things with fairy tales and forests is it is so different from our 3D life, is that in fairy tales you always get lost going into the forest. I mean, isn't that extraordinary? You get lost going in. For us, it's the other way around. You can wander for hours and then you suddenly go, uh-oh, how do I find my way home? In fairy tales, it's the other way around. You get lost and you're in a maze wandering, going in, and then when you're ready to come out, you've gone through the initiation process. You're like Persephone, who is now sovereign queen, coming out sipping pomegranate juice of ruby red nectar. You're sovereign queen with a level of authority. She knows who she is. The path is clear and it's easier and fast. So when you leave the forest, there's the path and it takes you out. And then it's your choice. Do you stay in the forest? Do you return to a village? Maybe you live on the edge. Maybe you return and live as the wise old woman or the wild green man of the forest as well. Maybe, like, I've got another little poem because I love these words by Jessica McLean. She says, on her return, I shall have a deep, deep well of silence in myself, and it will fill with the love flowing through me like a wild underground river. My roots shall rest in the earth's heart, and the God will be a personal friend of mine. And just bringing us into, okay, let me just see, there was something there on the chat. Some other questions. So let me take you into the, here we go, into the witch. I tried to, oh, okay. Yes, a lot of trees in the chat room. The trees of beloveds that you know in your area. I'm sorry about the challenge that you had getting into the room. I'm not quite sure what that was. But coming into the witch and the fairy tale forest, because in the forest there is always an old woman in there. Well, sometimes she's young and beautiful. Sometimes she's a hag. And then once you pass the initiation, she becomes Persephone again and beautiful. But there's always, always an old woman in there. There is always a witch. Now, historically in fairy tales, which was what was interesting, is that it wasn't always a so-called witch. That archetype came in a bit later. Initially, it was a goddess. It was a being who was not mortal, and it was always feminine. So the witch, the goddess, and sometimes it wasn't a goddess, it was a fairy. One of the fae, or the shining ones, the F-A-E, not what happened to fairies, as in F-A-I-R-Y, because in the fairy tales from the 1800s onwards, fairies became small and little flitty things. They lost a lot of their power and their majesty. Early on, the fae, were these immortal great beings, these shining ones of immense enchantment and power. So the early stories had them. or sometimes they were the goddesses in different myths. And then it sort of changed once the Greeks started taking over, and I'll just call it Zeusifying everything. So that's where this, or sometimes it was an old woman in the forest, a hen wife, and people would go in and ask questions of the hen wife or the old woman who lived there, which tracks back as well to the wise old woman of the land, the great creatrix of the earth. And sometimes it was a great dragon in the early stories, because those women, and this is a whole other story which I won't get into here, is that those women who were oracles and seers, they channeled the earth, and they channeled the earth through the portal of which the great dragons were guardians of. So there's this whole other level of memory that I think we have in our bones, so that when we connect with fairy tales, they awaken some of that deeper memory. That even though from the later 1600s, fairy tales are these, well, they weren't always fairy tales. They were just stories. They were just stories that people shared and told, stories that arose from the land and of the land and linked us into mystery. So when they became fairy tales in the later 1600s, they became a lot more conservative. They became moralizing political ways of maintaining the status quo, of maintaining misogyny or enforcing misogyny, enforcing morality, particularly for women, of creating the feminine as evil, as the witch, as something so ugly and murderous, or else seductive and sexual, a Lilith, or just something that needed to be destroyed, something treacherous, something which was always nasty. So that was sort of part of that demonizing of the sacred feminine. However, what I absolutely believe in my body, in my bones, in my blood, is that when we touch an archetype, even though it may be being spoken of in a certain way, like in Charles Perrault's fairy tales, which was so simplistic, moralizing, blah, won't go there, and then what the Grimms did to them, or early Disney stuff, there is still the bones of like a sleeping dragon within them. So that when we have an open-hearted connection with it, like an invitation or a curiosity, those archetypes touch us with the bigness of what they are and the potential that is within them and the memory that is within them. So when we talk them and anchor in that awareness, it also helps anchor that aspect of the archetype back on the planet. It helps anchor in the sacredness of these rich patterns that form part of our psyche and part of the psyche, the dreaming of the earth. It also opens us up to the wisdom and the teachings that they have as well, which helps us in our own recognizing our greater potential at these times. So the witch in fairy tales, sorry, I've just was caught by, there's a horse walking down my street. Just walk, some things, just that unexpectedness of what the forest brings in. It's a busy street. There's a horse out there. Okay. So expect the unexpected. Expect the gifts that we don't normally expect to see. So the witch, or that old woman, she's the one who knows the ways of the forest, the ways of the land. She's an instigator of change. She will challenge you on every level. She might kill you, metaphorically, death to that part of your being. What will you rise as? What is it that is longing to become, for you to live into at this moment? She's like Terry Pratchett's Granny Weatherwax. She don't play nice. She don't take no prisoners. But what she does is she's a living embodiment of the forest, who speaks in English so we can hear her, that she retains her enchantment and her magic. her spells, her enchantments, her shape-shifting. And that's what she can give to us. Remember what you are. Baba Yaga, Mother Holla, the Fae, the forest maidens, the grandmother, the beautiful dancing ones. I mean, do you think, I was just thinking of Sleeping Beauty from the Tangled Wood, and do you really think the 13th fairy who cursed the princess with 100 years of sleep, I mean, do you really think that was a curse? Because when she woke up, she knew the power of dreaming. When she woke up, she knew the power of being held in the embrace of briar roses. What it's like to have a boundary that says, do not pass. I am dreaming, I am visioning, I am taking my space. I guess it's all a matter of perspective and time and retrospect. She didn't know it wasn't a curse until after she woke up. And doesn't that often happen in life as well? So the instigator of change in fairy tales really reflects the cultural relationship with the feminine, particularly with women with power and with older women, or women who are transgressive in some way, or childless, women who have overstepped the mark. She cannot live in the village any longer because she shakes it up too much. She has to live in the forest. And maybe she chooses to. I mean, I can certainly understand the longing for the company of trees, but it's a journey to go in there and to find her and to be met by her and to see what it is that she awakens, to go and meet the fringe dweller, the one at the crossroads, the one who turns all your expectations on their head, the one who says, be still and let the forest find you. What will come alive in this moment? What will come alive in the core of your being? And what wants to be dreamed into in your life? And is there a horse archetype? Yes. Yeah, there is Rihanna nearby. Yes, think of all those gorgeous Celtic horse goddesses. Think of Epona, that horse's shapeshifter. Oh, that's a whole other conversation. Message me and we can chat more at another time. So what I'd love to do, I wish we had more chat time, because I can feel 100 conversations sort of in here as well. But what I'd love to do is to take us into a meditation space and drop you in, and then to be able to have a little bit of chat time afterwards, and see where you go. So if you breathe in and breathe out with a sigh on the exhaler, that's a lot of talking there for a little while. So have a stretch and let your bowels, let your roots have a stretch. Let the fungi around your roots myceliate your whole lovely body. Feel the way the moss can grow on your body, on your skin. And I'm just going to take you down into a quieter place, and to explore a bit how we might let the forest grow in our heart and in our psyche, and to take us into the mythic realm, into the mythic imagination, and to connect with the wise one of the forest, whatever they may be for you. And one of the things that I'll just mention before I do that is that sometimes we go in with a question. What the wise one, the witch, can do is to turn that question on its head. Sometimes she will ask you a question that you've never even dreamed of, that can change everything around. So there might be a question you receive, or a task. Often she gives us an impossible seeming task, and then the allies to help us. It's all about learning more about who we might be, who we really are. So let's go. Okay. So if you allow your breath, allow the fullness of your breath to flow into you and fill your being. Allow your breath to invite you into that quiet place in the core of your being. Come into that quiet, still place. You know that feeling when you're sitting at the base of a tree and everything just goes into that extraordinary oneness, and your belly relaxes and you drop down. So come into that center of your being and feel down through you into the earth. Feel down through your roots and the way your roots go down, past the rocks, into the waters, into the core of the earth, and feel that strength, that nurturing of the earth, and how you are just another earth body rising up from her. So with the earth underneath you and that earth energy flowing up through you, flowing up through your whole being and into the cosmos, and connecting you with the heavens, with the breath of life, the breath of love, and the energy of the cosmos washing down over you like a shower of nectar, and washing down over your field, down through your body, and flowing into your being, and feeling that balance of being held from heaven and earth. And come and rest in your heart. Come into your inner sanctum, the sanctuary of your heart space. Into that place where the light never ever goes out. And let your breath take you into that deeper part of your heart sanctum. And imagine looking out the back door of your heart, looking out into the universe, and feeling safe and held, moving between the worlds, between the stars, through time and space, and traveling into the mythic realm. Into the mythic realm where anything is possible, where the dreaming of you and of the earth begins. And coming into the place where you can see the forest edge, the great forest of the mythic realm, right there, huge trees. And before it is some kind of threshold for you to cross. And you're invited to come up to that threshold, whatever it is like, to pause for a moment before you enter the forest. And to cross it in your own way, if you choose. And when you're ready, entering into the forest, among the trees, feeling how the forest floor changes the sound of your footsteps. There's a different quality of air in here, different sense of moss and forest floor. There's that hush quiet as you enter. And then the sound of birds. You can almost feel with your skin, with your taste buds, with your heart, the life force in here. This forest is alive. And explore what this forest is like for you. Are you on a path? How dark, how light, how dense? How do you feel in the forest? And you will find your way to a strange house, the house of ancient wisdom, where the wise old woman, the witch, lives. And if you choose, you can knock on the door. If you choose, you might meet her. You might ask her the question in your heart. You might offer her something of yourself. Let her see you in some way. Maybe what you're feeling at the moment, or this is my love. This is what I'm grateful for. Let her see you. And I'll leave you to connect with her in your own way and in her way with you. She might give you a task or a question. She might offer you an ally to help. And with this task or this question, is there a gift to be revealed here? Is there a gift to be embodied? What might change immediately if you said yes to what the witch is offering? And knowing that you can visit any time, and that there might be further conversations through your dreams or your writing or your walking with the witch and with the forest, thanking her and making your way back through the trees, back along the path, and back across a threshold which may look different or similar. And then leaving the mythic realm and coming back through time and space between the stars and coming back into your heart space, coming back into your body, coming back home into yourself, feeling your fingers and your toes. And if there's anything that you would like to write down, anything that you would like to remember, and maybe there's a further question that the witch would like to offer you. And I'll just put other question in the chat as well. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to see what might flow through from your pen. Okay. So what I'd love to do is to hear a little bit from you. Is there anything that is bubbling up within you, anything that is dancing alive in you around the forest, around who it is you might meet in the forest, or anything that came up in the meditation that you'd like to share? And if you just raise your hand and take yourself off mute, and anything that that you're noticing. Oops, there we go. Okay. Oh, okay. There's somebody's hands up. I'm just flicking through many, many, many. Oh, there we go. Judith.
Hi.
Thanks.
One of the things that often appears in the ogre that maybe you could speak to in the forest is an ogre. Ogres often appear in forests. Maybe you could speak to that for a minute.
Ogres are, they're really interesting. Very similar to giants in that they're often They don't have the smarts. Then they're very instinctual. They're dense. They're heavy. They're stupid basically, but they're violent. So they thrash and smash things. So often, from a Jungian analysis way, they're about what is it in us that is dense, that is heavy, that keeps like the saboteur in us that keeps saying, "You're reaching for this? No way, out of there. I am just going to keep bringing you down. I am going to sit on you and squash you or eat you if you try and move in this way." So they can be easily outwitted and tricked. You can trip them up. You can easily outsmart them. They're just like they're kind of they're monstrous, and they're terrifying because of their size, but they can be so easily got around. So I really like that analogy of what in us keeps trying to trap us or trick us or trip us up. Mm. How does that resonate with you?
Well, yes, it feels sort of like very often there's a large obstacle. So if you see the ogre, it's this large obstacle that's in the way.
Yes, yes. A very dense, heavy obstacle that can really push us to discover our wiliness. Or a word that I absolutely adore is cunning, because cunning never used to mean sly or trickery. Cunning used to just basically mean cunning woman, someone who had a lot of wisdom. So it gets us to develop our cunning, to be able to get around them, those habits or patterns in ourselves. Or there's enough ogres in the world today that we often see represented in the media, or sometimes in our life, or sometimes we might have them as people that we know, metaphorically. Yeah, great question. Thank you. And let's see, Laurel. Oh, Lynette. Sorry, you were next, Lynette.
Hello, this has been absolutely wonderful. It was me. I was the old woman, the witch. I met myself.
Oh.
And then my eyes and my sight just opened. And it was me sitting in the house, hearing the fire. My logo and my name, my business is Soul Source Wisdom. Its symbol is mirrored essence. My God! Instead of Soul Source Wisdom, it's there as my logo, but it is the seer speaking wise. That is what I've got. I'm about to go into the recording studio to record some stories on Sunday. Allow stories to speak, dear one. It is all there. The work is done. Be the voice of her calling her children home. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for what you've brought into our circle. I can see someone else had that sense of waking up as being the old woman. Oh, I can hear how that's touched you. And I can feel how that's touched me and how it's resonating in the circle. Oh, reclaiming that voice, reclaiming what we can have access to. Thank you. I've just got time for one more. Laurel?
Hello, thank you. It's wonderful. My eyes were trying to see like different birds see at night, and I'm not, the mind knowledge is not coming, but the image of the owl's head doesn't actually turn around, probably not entirely. Anything you can say about birds flying at night, using sight or not using sight at all?
Oh my goodness. We could have, I think, 5 weeks exploring night birds. Oh my goodness, the way they move. I think that's a rather big question. Actually, what I'd like to do, because I could talk technically about feathers and silence and winged flight, but I'd love us to stay in that mythopoetic sense. And what you've brought into us is that sense of the owl and that all-seeing and that incredible way of moving, and that moving in a sightless way through sound and vibration and echolocation. I'd love to just leave us in that sense of feeling that around us, so that we can dream into that. Thank you for bringing it into our midst, Laurel.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Yes. Let's stay in our bodies with that. Doesn't that just bring up a sense of texture, of what it would feel like, of the air moving through you? Because the air just feels so different at night, and that feeling. Oh, I'd love to stay and do a lot more chatting with you. Let me just put up, if you want to get hold of me, my website was eaten by a virus, by an ogre, and I'll just put up where you can get hold of me there if you'd like to touch base with me. And thank you so much for being here today. What I'd like to do is just to say that's sort of the end of the forest and which part of the chat. I just want to have for a few minutes, have a chat about wolf song coming up, a shadow dance into the wild, or dancing with the wild. And I just really hope that the forest today has resonated with you. And so what I'd like to do is just to introduce you to the class and some of I've just put together this morning a whole bunch of bonuses that you might like for those who are interested in registering within 24 hours. But Wolf Song, Tracing the Shadow Dance of the Wild is a 7-week online sacred story journey, starting on November the 29th for Americans and November the 30th for Australians. And I'll just put up that detail there. It's going to be recorded for those who can't make it live. It's through Leah Lamb's Sacred School of Storytelling. There's a link for it there. So basically, Wolf Song takes us deeper into the forest of initiation. It's a really, really old version of Red Riding Hood, because I can't stand the story of Red Riding Hood, and it was a story that kept staying with me. And I found this version, which is a version involving the triple goddess. It involves wise old women, a cunning heroine, the fae, and a wolf who may or may not be quite what they seem, and probably a grandmother who shapeshifts. I also bring in the story of La Loba, the bone gatherer, who's the singer of new life, and we'll be exploring it over the really potent time of solstice and oh, thanks, Sarah, into over solstice, over New Year, and I think it might even just catch the energy of Thanksgiving as well for Americans. So it's a huge time. And I would like to offer Wolf Song as a threshold story, as an initiation journey, to be able to access more of our instinctual wisdom and to drop into a way of deepening into listening with ourself, with our body, and with the land, and to walk with wolf, or to dance with wolf, to put on your shaggy pelt for a while and see what wolf would like to speak through you, what it is that wolf would like to invite you to listen to, what it is that soul wants to come up for you at this time, and also what the wise woman in the House of Ancient Knowing is bringing on in. We'll also be exploring the red thread and what that might mean to you, that red thread down through our ancestry, our spirit ancestry, and down through the stories that we might track through eons to touch back into that deeper bone memory of ourself. The course is really experiential and interactive, kind of like what I do here. There'll be some talking, and I bring in a whole bunch of creative exercises as well, involving writing and drawing and movement and outside work and inside work, and creative books with prompts and everything in them. Oh, sorry, there's someone just banging very loudly on the door. It's just another, basically, I think of Wolf Song as like a really loud knock on the door. We can use everything around us as an incredible cue. So it's a knock on the door of soul that says, okay, I'm ready to listen. The other curious thing that is really coming up for Wolf Song this time is the option of creating a mask. So I'm going to create a video and some more sounding from Jane Elworthy for those of you who have heard Jane before around creating a mask related to bringing forward an expression of our wilderness self as well. So I'll bring that in, and it's an underworld journey. So it takes us to some really deep places, and it's also incredibly playful as well. If those two kind of get juxtaposed, there's a lot of oppositions that get met, the balancing of polarizing forces in these stories. And in the shadows, it's also about the revelation of great beauty and fierce beauty. And I guess one of the other things that the forest gives us is a sense of trust, or what it is that we can trust in ourselves. So that's basically what we'll be exploring. So let me just pop a link up there if you're interested. Oh, what I've put together as bonuses for you for this time. Whoops, I did that as a direct message. Let me make it to everybody. I gathered together a spring equinox ceremony about working with the heart tree, and a blessing with water ceremony, and an environmental and sacred geometry workshop that I did a while ago on working with environmental balancing. And I also brought in a plant spirit meditation of connecting with the Council of Trees, because they've been starting to come through big time. So if any of you are interested in exploring the Council of Trees as well. Any other questions or thoughts or things that arise for you? Anything? Any other hands, or just take yourself off mute? No. Okay. It's just been really lovely to connect with you. If you do have any questions
I
at
have a
all.
question.
Yeah, great,
It says
thanks.
register for the early, but put the coupon code in. But what's the coupon
Yeah,
code?
okay, when you go to that, I checked it this morning to make sure that it works. When you go to on Leah's website, which it's got early bird special and then a little code that says early bird.
Oh,
And then
okay.
you put that code in there when it takes you to the registration page, and it says it'll charge you $475. And you go, no, I only want to pay $375. And that will come straight through. Any problems, just if you send a message to Leah with that, because you'll get that early bird discount, and it's in US dollars, Australians. Just to be clear with that. Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts or things that come up? I really hope I get to see you in Wolf Song as we explore that. There's a couple of familiar faces here that I've seen who did Wolf Song with me in Australia last year, earlier this year as well. It's quite a glorious journey. So have a beautiful day, everyone, or a lovely, lovely evening, and have a wonderful. Today is a portal day, the 11/11 here in Australia, and coming around soon for you Americans. So if you would like to sit more with the energy of the forest and what the wise old woman is speaking through you, then it's a wonderful day where the veil between the worlds is really thin, to go for a walk or a wander or a sit and see what else might emerge for you. So thank you, everybody. I really look forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful, magical, enchanted day. Okay.